Hello, this is Mr. Ludy. This is our video for notes on PORHEPCAC, P and O, or problem and observation. PORHEPCAC is the way I describe scientific method. So one of the first things you need to do is get familiar with this handout that you received probably today in class. It's technically called a guide to your lab reports, but when I'm talking about writing a lab report, I'm talking about scientific method, I will commonly just refer to this as PORHEPCAC. PORHEPCAC. So when we talk about PORHEPCAC, that's what we're talking about. So one thing you need to be able to do is, if I simply say, what are the 9 parts of PORHEPCAC, you need to be able to quickly recreate PORHEPCAC. Know how to spell it, know which one it is, and then obviously as we get into this more, you're going to need to know the difference between the first P and this P and this C and this C. So I'm not going to write it out here because we can simply go back to the handout you have, and our parts are problem, observations, research, hypothesis, experiment and procedure, that's the E and the P, collect data is the first C, analyze data, and then conclusion. So please, please, please know the 9 parts of scientific method. Some books teach this differently. You will, in your science class life, see 5 steps, 6 steps, maybe 7. I teach it with 9. We never really talk about materials. A lot of times if you write a lab report, your teacher will have you have a list of the materials because it makes the lab easier to do. So you'll never see it the same way. This is simply the way I go about it. So now what I'd like to do is talk about a couple of them more specifically in deeper detail. And the 2 I want to talk about more are the P and the O. So first we have problem. If we talk about problem, well, that's what science and all problem solving has to start with. You need to know that you have a problem. In other cases, instead of problem, they may reword this, and instead of saying problem, they may say, well, what's your question? What were you wondering about? But either way, you're still talking about the same thing. What problem are you trying to figure out? What was your question? The key to problem is that it must be testable. This is the one absolute requirement for a scientific problem. It has to be testable. If it can't be tested in a lab, or if we cannot do an experiment to try to figure out the answer, then it is of no use to a scientist. We will talk about possible problems that are not testable in class, but problems must be testable. The second part of PORHEPCAC is observations. Well, think about the problem. When in your life have you come into contact with this situation? Describe it. Tell what you've heard about it or what you know about it. The things we will do here will be things that you have usually at least a little bit of knowledge about. You will be responsible for writing this down. Don't get lazy and only say one thing. So with observations, I always like to break observations into 2 parts. Observation, you don't have to do both, but observations can basically be broken down to 2 things. The two things that can be broken down into are prior knowledge. Prior knowledge. You already knew it. We are going to do a lab fairly soon about cars and speeding cars. Well, I believe everybody has probably been in a car before. You've probably been in a speeding car before. So everybody has prior knowledge about a car and a speeding car. You've probably seen at least a video of somebody bungee jumping. So when we do the Barbie bungee jump lab, you've at least got some prior knowledge because you've at least seen a video of somebody bungee jumping. So what are you coming to class with? What do you already know about our problem? What do you already know about what we are now working on? The other part of observation is, well, you got the prior knowledge somehow. You already knew it, and you knew it probably because you saw it, you heard it. Now what we are talking about are our five senses. Now we're talking about the five senses. And whenever I want to try to remember all five senses, I usually start pointing at the top of my head and I work down and I remember all five senses. Because the first one is sight. The second one, you got to move to the side, hear. Now move back to the front, smell. Move down a little bit, taste. Move down a little, oh, we were using it all along, touch. So, observations are things you already knew, but you had to have gotten that info somehow, or they are things that you are doing in the moment. You're now actually hopefully going to gain some prior knowledge for a future event because you're going to look at it. In some cases, you might hear something. In a fewer cases, you may smell something. You could taste it rarely, and especially in chemistry, but that's what cooking is. You could taste it and you can touch it. So all observations are things you already know or things that you do at that moment and get with your five senses. But you got your prior knowledge from the five senses to begin with. So PORHEPCAC, know the 9 letters, know what they stand for, and then specifically, as of today, know that problem could also be known as a question. It is testable. It must be testable in order for us to do anything with it. And then we're going to make some observations. Observations are prior knowledge or something you get using your 5 senses, which are sight, hear, smell, taste, and touch. Thank you very much. Have this in your notebook for tomorrow, and we will move on into the rest of PORHEPCAC in the coming days. Thank you very much.